Yep. All right, well, thank you very much, and it's an honor to be here. I'm going to use a microphone just because I tend to move a lot when I speak. So first of all, I would like to say that when I was invited to the conference, I was absolutely terrified because I am a journalist, and I know that scientists and statisticians tend to distrust journalists for the right reasons, in my opinion. So if you're following me on Twitter, or if you are following the conference on Twitter, you will see that I am tweeting all the time. So this morning, before the conference began, I was thinking, well, being a journalist, this is not a real tweet, but the next one is the real tweet that I tweeted. I said, being a journalist, I believe that I'm going to feel like a non-cannibal character from the Cannibal Holocaust movie. I don't remember if you know that movie. It's a movie about cannibals that eat people. So I feel like one of those people that are being eaten by the cannibals. You are the cannibals, I am the person being eaten. But at the same time, every time that I talk to an audience of statisticians, and this has happened, quite a lot in the past few years, I also know that I get along very well with people like you, because we have common interests. And as you are going to see in my next slides, many of the concerns that I have recently actually connect to what my colleagues on the panel here have been discussing so far. So first of all, I would like to define what I do for a living and what I teach for a living. What I do for a living, teach for a living, is visualization. For me, a visualization is any kind of graphical representation of information intended to show what cannot be seen otherwise. All right? So within this, broad understanding of visualization, you obviously have data visualization. You begin with a set of data that you represent visually in order to extract trends and patterns in the data, either to explore the data or to communicate the data to other people. But within this definition of visualization, we may have other kinds of visualizations. For example, imagine an illustration of this same building intended to represent the structure of that building. And you draw the building and you do a cutaway of the building, so you show me simultaneously the outside and the inside of the building. That is also a visualization, because you are also revealing what cannot be seen otherwise. You are making the invisible visible. That is the whole goal of visualization. So I was mentioning before that I was happy to see that my interests actually connect to the interests of my colleagues here on the panel. I was already foreseeing that when I saw the front cover of the program, and I saw that it was titled New Techniques at Technology and Statistics, and suddenly I saw there reliable evidence for a society in transition. This is a huge, huge concern of mine. Reliable evidence. Not only how we collect reliable evidence, that is not my area of expertise, obviously, but my area of expertise is how we communicate reliable evidence to people. That is what really, really worries me. And also how people can assess, the general public, how people can assess the quality of the evidence that is being presented to them. I'm not talking about you. You are all experts in statistics. I'm talking about the general public. How can they assess the quality of the information? This concern listed over here is actually the concern behind the first book that I wrote, The Functional Art, that was published 4 years ago. And it is also the concern of the book that I'm currently writing, which is called The Truthful Art. That is the dummy cover of the book that I'm writing at the moment and will be published in 2016. And all the concerns in this book are connected to this idea, reliable evidence, and how to communicate that reliable evidence in a way that people can easily understand. How do we teach people first what evidence is and what evidence means? That is a huge concern of mine. It's actually that I'm writing a lot about recently. How do we explain this to the general public? And when I think about the general public, I don't think about an abstract entity, the general public. I think about my children. I have 3 children, so I want them to be informed in the future. I want them to be being able to assess the quality of the evidence that is being presented to them. And I do believe that a basic understanding of statistics, a basic understanding of scientific thinking, and a basic understanding of visualization can help a lot in that goal. Actually, my 9-year-old, which is the one over there, he's posing with the first bar graph that he ever designed. That made me really, really proud. So that is the first thing, right? How can we teach this to the general public? And also, How do we convince the general public of how powerful statistics and visualization and visual representation information can be to explore and to present data? So I'm going to give you just a few examples that I'm using in my book, that I use in my own classes to express this problem or to talk about this problem. Because we are facing a challenge nowadays. It's a huge, huge challenge. This challenge is actually summarized in this sentence by Maureen Dowd, a columnist in the New York Times, who wrote a while ago, "Never before have we had so many tools to learn and to communicate, yet the art of talking, listening, and ascertainty the truth seems more elusive than ever in this internet and cable age, lost in a bitter stream of blather and misinformation." This is a huge, huge challenge, and it is a challenge that we need to face together. Both you and myself, both you and my people, both your people and my people working together, in my opinion. All right, cases like these, or this problem leads to, you know, these kinds of challenges. For example, people not giving vaccines to their children for the wrong reasons, because they are not able to assess the evidence that basically, I would not say prove, because proof is a very strong word, but shows actually with a great degree of certainty that vaccines are safe and that vaccines work. We have a huge, huge certainty of that fact, all right? Now, the world today has changed. In the past, before the internet, people in general, the general public, knew very little about science and stats. But that was not a huge problem, because the kinds of information that they got were just coming from few sources. They only had the morning paper, they only had the evening news, and that was basically it. But when the World Wide Web was invented and people started accessing content from the internet, I do believe that that is a great revolution. It's a fantastic revolution, but there is a problem over there. The situation, the current situation, is extremely different, because the general public is still very misinformed about what stats, what science, what evidence is, but they can access tons of sources to get that information. That is a confirmation bias paradise, because if you have any crazy idea about vaccines, for example, you will be able to just look for the evidence that basically confirms your own assumptions, all right? And you will just focus on those assumptions, right? So the only way we can face this situation, the situation in which people can access any kind of information, is if we address this part of the problem that the public still knows very little about stats and about science and about quantitative thinking and about analytical thinking in general, all right? The problem is that we cannot fight this problem, or we cannot face this problem just with evidence. Evidence is not enough. You may have all the evidence in the world and the best evidence in the world, that if you don't present it well, the message will not go through. And that is another challenge that we face and that I'm very, very concerned about. Where do we go? How do we do it? I do believe that visualization can be a very powerful tool to present evidence. For example, let me show you an example closely related to the vaccine situation in the United States. A few weeks ago, the Wall Street Journal, which is a good newspaper that publishes very, very good data visualization, published this visualization project. I'm just showing you a screenshot from this project, but it's a very, very long visualization project titled "Battling Infectious Diseases in the 20th Century, the Impact of Vaccines." And the chart that you have over here is basically a heat map in which the darker the color, the higher the number of cases of, in this case, measles. All right, so the darker or the stronger the color, the more cases you have. So as you can see, 1930s, 1940s, 1950s, 1960s, all states in the United States presented a huge amount of cases of measles. But suddenly, after the vaccine was introduced over here, all cases disappeared. This is persuasive. It is still evidence-driven, it is still data-based evidence, right? But it is presented in a way that the picture becomes clear, not only to you or to me, people who like to work with data, but to people who know very little about data or who know very little about statistics. It's extremely convincing. I do believe that we need to explore these kinds of presentations more and use them more and more and more to inform the public. Let me show you another example, because I also do believe that many, many people out there are embracing this idea. This is a book about OkCupid. I don't know if you have ever heard of OkCupid. OkCupid is a a dating website. So if you're interested in dating someone from the United States, you can create a profile in that service, and then you basically input all your data in there, right? You're asked for your age, for your preferences, for your whatever. Obviously, all those data are collected, and the author of the book, Christian Rudder, who is one of the founders of OkCupid, in the book explains how they collect the data, how they process their data, right? It explains it in a very engaging manner. But the wonderful thing is that he also presents the results of those analyses using very simple but very persuasive and very funny visualizations. I'm going to show you just the two funniest ones that I saw in the book. The first one is, let me tell you in advance, whenever you sign up for a service like OkCupid, the service shows you pictures of people that you may want to date, right? So they show you a picture of a woman, for example, if you're a man, in my case, heterosexual, and you need to rate that person. You're asked to rate that person in terms of attractiveness on a scale from 0 to 10, okay? So they collect all those data, they aggregate those data, they average all those data, and then analyze them. Now, the first graphic that one of the first graphics in the book is this one, right? It's extremely simple. It's basically a woman's age, these are the ages of women, versus the age of the men who look best to her. This means that, on average, women who are 20 like men who are 23, women who are 30 like men who are 30, women who are 40 like men who are 38, women who are 50 like men who are 46. What would happen if we do the opposite? If we ask men for the ages of the women that they like? You are seeing this coming, right? Because the picture is completely different. This is the college professor teaching undergraduate students, right? So anyway, let's leave it there. Now, obviously, any visualization hides, in many cases, as much as it shows, because obviously this is the average. We are not seeing the range, we are not seeing the distribution. Actually, a histogram in there would be quite interesting, because it could be that the distribution is bimodal, and then you have a lot of people over here, but also a lot of people over here, right? A lot of 50-year-olds that also like women who are their age. But it's persuasive, right? It's so striking, it's so clear and direct. This is the power and also the danger of data visualization, how clear and persuasive it can be. So, one of the things that I would like to teach my children, and remember that I'm using my children as a proxy for the general public, all right? I never think about the general public, I think about my children. I would like them to embrace the joys of discovery using data, right? Using information, using data. I do believe that there is a problem. We talked about, Professor Pfefferman before mentioned how stats are taught to statisticians. I would like to talk a little bit about how stats are taught to non-statisticians. And I'm going to tell you in advance, I hated statistics when I took a statistics course when I was in college. I only came to love statistics afterwards. When I started reading, for example, John Takei, when I started reading, for example, David Hand, I saw that David Hand is on the program, and his latest book, The Improbability Principle, is absolutely amazing. So when I started reading all those authors, I came to love statistics, because I saw that statistics is not just mathematics. It's just it's quantitative thinking, it's reasoning. So let's teach reasoning to people, right? And let's also teach people that statistics and data visualization can be used to explore data. And that is a very fun process, right? So I actually came up with a series of examples that I use in my classes to teach to my students who are not going to be statisticians how fun it can be to play with numbers in some cases. I was inspired, obviously, I mentioned John Takei already. I was inspired by obviously reading Exploratory Data Analysis, a wonderful book published in the 70s, and also, you know, books such as Understanding Data, which is an update of Takei, and other books about exploratory data analysis. And what I teach to my students is that you can create very successful and very pretty and also very revealing visualizations using very simple tools. So for example, for my own visualizations, I use Adobe Illustrator, I use a little bit of Tableau, and I also know how to use R, but I'm not a very advanced user of R or ggplot2, but just learning a little bit about these programs can take a non-statistician a long way. So let me show you just one of the examples that I use in my classes. I tell to my students, it's an exercise of semi-random exploration of data related to something that matters to me, which is another critical thing when we teach statistics, I believe, trying to create examples that relate to students, all right? So let me show you an example. I moved to Miami. I'm originally from Spain, and I lived in Brazil for a couple of years, and then I moved to Miami from Brazil in 2012. When I moved to Miami in 2012, we moved to a certain region. I wanted to assess the quality of the schools that my children were going to attend, right? So I went online, I went to the Miami-Dade school system, and I downloaded a data set of the grades that each one of the schools have, which is basically a letter that the local government assigns to every single school, an A, a B, a C, etc. And I saw that the schools, the primary school, the middle school, and the high school in my area, all of them were A's. And I said, wonderful, but then I thought, compared to what? Because it may happen that all the schools in Miami-Dade are getting A's, right? We may have, grade inflation also when it comes to a grade school. So I decided I need more data. So I went online and I downloaded a second data set, which is relatively small. It's only 400 rows. This is the data set that I downloaded. All right, it's just the first few schools. This is basically all the schools in Miami-Dade, and the numbers that you have over here: reading, math. This is the percentage of students in each one of these schools that are reading at the adequate level, at the level that corresponds to them, right? So you will see that, for example, this school over here, 82% of students are reading really well. But if you go into Arcola Lake Elementary, only 39% of students are reading well, according to the standards that the government has set for them, right? Same thing for math, 71% versus 40-something%. And, well, I was basically reassured because I saw that the numbers in the schools that my children were going to attend were 90, 95. So they are certainly good schools. So I said, well, perfect, fine. But then this was in a Sunday afternoon, and I had a little bit of time on my hand. I said, what about, because, exploratory analysis or exploration, I would not call it exploratory data analysis, I'm not a statistician. Playing with data sometimes is just a matter of asking yourself, what if? I said, what if I try to see if there is a relationship in there, a correlation between the math percentages and the reading percentages? And I created a very simple scatter plot, right? Very, very simple scatter plot using ggplot2. And obviously there is a relationship, right? So the better a school is at reading, right, the better that school tends to be at math. The picture gets a little bit cut off, but this is the percentage of students who are doing well in math. And I see that it was a relationship, right? Very clear relationship. All of them are very, very close to the trend line. There's not a trend line there. I should draw it. But anyway, but then as a journalist, okay, I don't call myself a data journalist, but I'm a journalist who likes to play with data. I started seeing potential stories in this data set. I said, well, if I were working in a newsroom, like in the Miami Herald, I would like to send a reporter to see what is going on in this school, what is going on in that school, what is going on in those schools, what is going on in those schools that are outliers, that are perhaps very good at reading but very bad at math, or the opposite, right? So it's what if. Then at this point I said, and remember that this is an example that I explained to my students in a very similar way that I'm doing right now. I said, well, what if, all right, so if I go back to the data set, you will see that the schools in Miami are divided on several board districts. There are 9 board districts in Miami. So the city of Miami is divided into 9 board districts. I said, what if we create a scatter plot for every single board district in Miami? I was not very familiar with the geography of board districts in Miami. So I said, let's tell ggplot here with a single line of code in there, divide and create 9 scatter plots. And these are the results. These are the 9 scatter plots that I saw. And suddenly I saw that there are very interesting stories in the data. Because school board district number 1 and number 2, most of the schools are really bad, with one exception. This is a possible story. It's a very interesting story. What school is that? I want to know more. This is all about the I want to know more factor. And then all schools over here are really good on board district number 3. That's quite interesting. And then there are board districts, like for example, board district number 6, in which the schools are very spread out, right? Why? I said, what if I go to the board district, to the school system again, to the school system website again? I download a map of the board districts, and I draw that map, and I do that. I drew the map of the board districts in Miami because I knew nothing about the geography of these board districts. And I said, what if I overlay this map on a map? I put it on top of a map of, let's say, income levels to see what happens. I downloaded data from the census, and here's what happens. Take a look at this. This is a map of Miami. And take a look at what happens. Board district number 1 and board district number 2, in which all schools are, or most schools are really, really bad, are areas in which income levels are really, really low. These are the areas of Little Haiti and Overtown, very poor neighborhoods in Miami. And these are not huge areas, all right? It's just a few blocks, each one of them. That means there are incredible differences and a very stark inequality in terms not only in income, but also in terms of educational quality. So, I mean, a single street in some cases divides a very good area from a very bad area. That reproduces also in terms of school quality. That is very interesting. That is very interesting. School district number 3, that's Miami Beach, one of the richest areas in Miami. And there are more interesting stories lurking in the data, in my opinion. At this point, we don't have any story. We have just clues to things that we can further explore. This is all about getting excited about the information and about the data, right? We are not doing any data analysis in any formal way. We are just playing with data. I said, well, take a look at this district over here. Probably you know nothing of the geography of Miami, but I'm going to explain this to you. This is the school district that is more spread out in terms of quality. This is the school district over here. A very, very wealthy strip of land called Coconut Grove. And then on the other side of the road over here, a very, very poor neighborhood, extremely poor neighborhood. For me, as a journalist, if I were a managing editor from the Miami Herald, I would immediately send a reporter to those areas to see, I don't know, to see if these bad schools are located here and these good schools are located here. And then I will try to obviously to understand why all these inequalities happen. We probably will need to start working with you, statisticians, researchers, etc., in order to understand what's going on in Miami. Here we only have the clues to the story. I do believe that if we teach statistics to people like this, beginning with this kind of thing, people will get excited about the data because they will see the possibilities of what can be done, what can be achieved, what can be seen in the data. And then you can move on. And as I start talking about all these things in a more formal manner, actually doing exploratory and confirmatory analysis later on. Putting our mind in motion, and I'm bringing my kids here, sparking curiosity will make these minds move forward. Curiosity is the fuel to minds, right? So if we bring this curiosity up, it will drive them, to learn more and to explore more and to embrace, the possibilities that lie behind statistics and data analysis. Learning about stats, obviously, and learning about visualization as well can help people seeing bullshit when they see bullshit, okay? I'm going to show you an example of bullshit, of visualization bullshit. This is the website of the NCTA. The NCTA is the National Cable and Telecommunications Association, which is an association that does PR, very effective and very good PR and very good marketing for the cable industry in the United States. And this is the front page of their website, right? On the front page of their website, they have these check the numbers, and obviously I love checking numbers, so I check the numbers, get the facts about broadband or whatever, and they have this bar graph graph over here. Less regulation leads to more industry investment. That means that the more the government takes a hands-off approach to the market, the more these companies will invest. I redesigned this chart because I do want to use it in my next book without permission. And so I redesigned it with the same title, right? The message is extremely clear, right? Less regulation leads to more infrastructure, investment in infrastructure. Following the 1992 cable regulations, investment in cable infrastructure was just $14 billion, really, really low. But after these regulations were relaxed, suddenly the investment went up, $56 billion, right? So we should just kill all regulations. Let's these people act in the market. Well, one basic rule of everything of life is that, I believe, not only statistics or journalism, in life, is that if someone hides relevant data from you, it's probably because they have something to hide, right? So, for example, what happened between 1996 and 1999? They are not showing those years. And obviously, they are aggregating the data, right? They are adding up all those years. They are not showing the variation within those years, right? They are adding everything up. That is another way of concealing relevant data. So when I saw this on Twitter, I love, calling bullshit when I see bullshit. I basically replied to the person who posted this chart on Twitter and said, we need to see the entire data set. We need to see the entire line chart to see the variation year by year. Because I said, this chart is probably lying because they are hiding data. And they replied first saying, no. The data is well aggregated. It tells the story very well. And I said, certainly, it tells the story very well, but probably that is the wrong story. So I want to see the entire data set. And basically, at the end, they basically yielded, and they sent me a link to a blog post that they published years ago that is hidden deep inside their website, not prominently displayed on the front page of their website, in which you can see an entirely different line chart. And this is the line chart that they have. It is not true that after regulations were passed in 1992, investment went down. It is not true. After regulations were passed, investment started going up. It is true, though, that after the market was deregulated with the Telecommunications Act, investment went up a little bit. It went down probably because of the '98 economic crisis, and then it basically started growing up very, very quickly. But at this point, I am already distrusting these people, and I will start thinking about alternative explanations for that sharp spike. For example, that growth in investment is it's basically happened between the 1998 and 2002. At this time, the internet market in the United States was booming. A lot of people wanted to have access to the internet, and they demanded access to the internet from these companies. So probably that spike in investment is related to the fact that these people were responding to the needs of the market, right? So this is the problem that we are facing today. This very, very, very basic analysis of a chart is something that not many people can do. You can do it, I can do it, my children can't, unless that we educate them in order to be able to create this kind of very basic analysis. You don't need, high-end statistics to do this kind of analysis. You need quantitative thinking. I do believe that a basic course of statistics, this is my own opinion, okay, and we can debate about that. A basic course of statistics for non-statisticians should include, obviously, a little bit of probability theory, a little bit of data analysis, and quantitative thinking is just reasoning. And then later on, if you have time, and you usually have time, you start showing the mathematical underpinnings of all those methods. But the critical thinking is the most important part for the general public, for general citizens. They will never do, a general citizen will never do a hypothesis testing, for example. They need to know what that is, obviously, and how it works, and what the problems are, etc. But they will never conduct a hypothesis testing, right? It needs to be taught, but before that, I believe, my own opinion is that we need to teach this kind of critical thinking skills. These critical thinking skills, by the way, are extremely important not only to detect bullshit that has been done by others, it's also very important to detect bullshit that your own brain creates, because we are bullshit creators. We see patterns when there are no patterns over there, we see noise and then we extract a pattern that isn't really there, we see trends in data. Let me show you just an example of one time when I was completely misled by data, all right? And I made a huge mistake. So every year I go to Ukraine to teach a course on data visualization, a visualization course, a one-week visualization course for journalists, researchers, etc., etc. Last time that I went there was just a few months ago. I was in Lviv, in the western part of the country, but I usually go to Kiev. I will probably go to Kiev in June this year. I love that country. Anyway, so the previous time that I went there was in 2012. I didn't go in 2013 or 2014 for obvious reasons, because of the crisis in there, etc., right? They didn't invite me, basically. When I went there in 2012, I met people who do visualization for an online news organization called Texty. These people are amazing, right? And they create wonderful, wonderful data visualizations. I'm going to show you just one of them. So these people basically contacted me and saying, well, we do graphics and we want you to take a look at them and see if you have any feedback. I said, sure, come over. I will be happy to take a look at them. Very fun people, nice people. The most striking graphic that they showed me was a proportional symbol map, a map with lots of little bubbles, proportionally scaled according to the data that was represented. The data that was being represented was the results of the parliamentary elections in 2012. In the 2012 parliamentary elections, you had a pro-Russian coalition and a pro-Western coalition. We can put it this way. This is a little bit of a simplistic label, but we can summarize it like that. So you're going to see a map with bubbles of different colors. If the bubble is blue, that means that on that particular district, the party that won, or the group that won, was the pro-Western group. And if you see a bubble that is orange, that means that in that particular region, that particular area, the coalition that won was the pro-Western region, right? So you have pro-Western parties and pro-Russian parties. Clear? All right. So I'm going to show you the map, and pretty attentively, without even thinking, I want you to say the word that comes to your mind that better describes the political and cultural situation in Ukraine. You don't need to say it because I will not hear you, obviously, but try to say it to yourselves. Take a look at that map. It's impressive, right? It's like two different countries. The western part of the country, the majority of people there voted for the pro-Western coalition, and the eastern part of the country voted, the majority of people there voted for the pro-Russian coalition. Pro-Western, pro-Russian. This happened in 2012, right? Remember that? For example, I knew very little at the time about the political situation in Ukraine, right? This was extremely revealing to me. I said, wow, this is like two different countries. This happened in 2012, before the revolution, before the former president got expelled. I went home in 2012. And then, you know, the revolution began. The protests against the former president began. And this is one of the first maps that the BBC published when the protests against the pro-Russian party, the pro-Russian party and the former president began. These are the cities where all that began. Do you notice something? Do you notice an interesting pattern in there? Take a look at that. I'm going to do that for you. I'm going to put the two maps side by side on top of each other. Protests, pro-Western. Protests, pro-Western. That's a pattern. That's a pattern. Very clear pattern. Is that pattern true? We don't know. Anyway, so Western media started publishing all these maps, right? That one. And then they publish also maps such as this one. This is a map that was published by the Washington Post. All Western media, after the revolution began in Ukraine, started selling this narrative of Ukraine being two different countries, pro-Western and pro-Russian. That was the narrative that was being told in the Washington Post and other media. And this is a very striking depiction of that situation, right? These are languages spoken in Ukraine. People over here speak mostly in Ukrainian. People over here, they tend to speak more Russian. So again, we have Russian, Western, Russian, Western, Russian, Western. When I saw all these maps being published in Western media, I immediately sent an email to the person who created this map. His name is Anatoly Bondarenko. He's one of the most talented visualization designers I have ever met. And I sent him a picture of his map and then screenshots of all those other maps. And I said, Anatoly, your map is like, it summarizes everything. It tells the whole story. I don't need to know anything else. It tells the whole story. It's like two different countries. This is why this situation is happening. It's like pro-Western here, pro-Russian here. We don't need to know anything else. And he replied to me with a sentence that you love and with a sentence that I love, and I love to repeat in my own classes, which is, yeah, The pattern is there, and it exists, and it corresponds to truth, but the story is more complicated than that. And he sent me the results of several surveys, opinion surveys in Ukraine. And again, don't ask me about what samples they used, what the confidence interval was, etc. But they sent me the results of several surveys in Ukraine, asking people if they were in favor of strengthening the ties with the European Union or strengthening the ties with Russia in terms of commercial agreements. And here are the results of those surveys. If you go to Western Ukraine, this area over here, 70% of people in that area are in favor of joining the European Union in some manner, okay? Commercial ties or whatever. And only 10%, again, I don't know what the uncertainty of the data is here, but let's assume that there is no uncertainty, which is not true, obviously. 10% of people in that area are in favor of joining Russia. Let's go to the supposedly most pro-Russian regions of the country. So, for example, Crimea, right? The south. 28 or 27% of people in that area are in favor of strengthening the ties with the European Union. And only 30-something% were in favor of joining Russia. Now they are Russia, obviously, because they have been occupied. If you go to the most pro-Russian part of the country, the eastern part of the country, the picture is still more interesting. Because it is true that only, 18% of people are in favor of strengthening the ties with the European Union, but only 50 or 51% of people in that area are in favor of joining Russia. So the picture is more complicated than that. The lesson that I extracted from this exercise, and something that I explain to my students, is don't trust your own intuitions first. That is the first thing. Always look for more data so you can compare things. And also, it's a lesson for communicating data. If you show that map to Ukrainian audiences, they will be able to put that map in context, because they already know that their country is much more complicated, much more nuanced than what that map shows. If you show that same map to non-Ukrainian audiences like me, I will jump to conclusions, because I don't have the same background knowledge that Ukrainian people have. Therefore, the audience that you're talking to can guide you through the process of deciding what to show. If I were to publish this story in a Western newspaper or magazine, I would not publish just the map. I would publish the map and the results of several surveys, because the surveys would put the map in context. A number on its own usually means nothing. It only means something when we compare it to something, right? And finally, another thing that I will tell my kids if I want to explain to them how powerful visualization can be, or how dangerous it can be if it's not well managed, is learn the rules. There are rules in visualization. Rules that are related to the presentation of data, rules that are related to graphic design, all right? We should learn how to do graphic design well in order to present our ideas well, all right? But the problem is that we are surrounded by bad design. Now, after this presentation is over, we will have lunch. I would like you to go to the restrooms, to the toilets here, and you will see an example of bad design. I actually went to the toilet when I saw that. I took my iPad and I showed a picture of the faucet, how do you call that in America, the tap. Now, I wanted to wash my hands, obviously, right, after doing what I was doing. And I went there, and I saw that, and I said, how to operate that? And I said, all right, I'm going to try to push it. And I started pushing it, and it didn't work. And I kept pushing it, and I started doing that, pa, 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 until I realized that in order to operate that thing, you need to rotate it. This is a little bit of advice for you in case that you need to use the toilet, right? This is an example of bad design. Why is it bad design? Well, I don't have time today to explain everything related to this, but there is a lot of cognitive science behind why this thing doesn't work. It's related to the fact that the shape of an object should tell you somehow how to operate that object. If it has that shape, it pushes you, it forces you, it prompts you to push it just because it has that particular shape. Well, let me show you the equivalent of this kind of thing in data visualization. Just one of the equivalents in data visualization. I'm going to show you a chart. It's a chart based on completely fake data, but it's a kind of chart that we see all the time in business reports and in summary statistics, etc. Let's imagine, for example, that you do a survey among University of Miami students and you ask them what kind of music genre they like, okay? So, you know, in 1994, when I did this completely fictional survey, 35% of my students like hard rock, and I like hard rock, so I was making an assumption in there. 25% like samba, 20% like hip hop, 10% like reggaeton, 5% country and 5% classic. Now, question for you. Has hard rock become more or less popular? More popular, right? That's very clear, right? What about samba? Is samba more popular or less popular? I am hiding the numbers in purpose because this is another rule of visualization design. Again, I don't have time to explain all the rules of visualization design. If you do need to read all the numbers in a visualization, the visualization is worthless, basically. All right? We need to think about the purposes, the functions of the visualization, right? Now, samba, more popular or less popular? I don't know. What about hip hop? I don't know. It's impossible. More, yeah, more, less, more, less. More, yeah, I don't know. It's impossible to know, right? Now, the thing is that the purpose of this particular visualization is defined in the title, how music preferences have changed in 2 decades. We are not intending to show parts of a whole. We want to see how things change. Therefore, we need to show change. For example, using a line chart, using a slope graph like this one, showing things going up, things going down, things going up, things going up. In this case, it's just immediate. You don't need to read any number. You immediately get the message. Again, I don't have time to, explain every single rule here of visualization design. That's because I teach a semester-long course on all these rules, obviously. But just keep this idea in mind, is really crucial. The purpose of the graphic needs to guide your decisions in terms of what graphic forms to choose to represent the data. Don't go to the defaults that Excel prompts you to use, for example. Right? Because you will end up creating pie charts that are impossible to read, for example, or impossible to interpret. So going back to the beginning of the presentation, just to finish my talk today, reliable evidence is not enough. It is not enough to get reliable evidence. That evidence needs to be presented well. Therefore, your conference is called New Techniques and Technologies for Statistics. Don't think that communication is an afterthought. Don't think that visualization is an afterthought. Communication and visualization are new techniques, and they are integral to the work that you're trying to do. Don't leave that to the very end of the process. Make them part of what you do every single day. I do believe that if we do that, we will be able to collaborate, and I also believe that at the end, the results will be a more informed public, and at the end, as a result of that, a better world. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. That's my contact information, alberto.cairo@gmail.com. My website is The Functional Art. I am also on Twitter. Thank you very much.